everybody, and welcome to the Game Changer Show. Each and every single Wednesday, 6 p.m. UK time. I'm excited about today's show, as I always am, of course. Hope you guys have had a fantastic week. And interestingly enough, last week we had Julian Schutter from Vancouver Island, Canada, who I actually met on Clubhouse, and he kind of hangs out with a few of my gang as such, and such a great guy. And we had some amazing conversations last week. If you haven't had the opportunity to do so, and you're listening to this on YouTube, of course, make sure that you go back to the previous show, because I can guarantee you'll pick up some great golden nuggets in that show. It was great. So anyway, back to business. Couple of updates in kind of the game-changing world, if you like. So first things first, like yesterday, we had a great show that just came out with a lady called Zoe Cans. Now, Zoe's background essentially is all in, I suppose she's got a lot of great experience in the social media world. And she actually worked in mortgage broking originally, but then got into social media management, has had extensive results in working with corporate clients, but mainly loves working with SMEs, of course. So she's talked a lot about how to improve engagement, conversations, conversions, and clients and customers. And I love that about people. I think that's fantastic, which is great. So it's a great show yesterday. If you haven't already checked it out, make sure that you go to the Game Changers Experience, right, and download that, because honestly, it's a great show. There was so much we went through: social media strategy, conversations, oh my God, it was just a fantastic episode. If you're listening to me on StreamYard, okay, which is probably most of you, by the way, make sure you accept the T's and the C's, which is above my head, which is here. And otherwise, I won't know who you are. It will come up: Facebook user, YouTube user, LinkedIn user. But you guys, you know the score, right? So do me a favor, if you're listening to me, click on the T's, the StreamYard here on top of it. Then I can see who you are, because I like to engage with real people, right? And I'm sure that you do as well. It's always good to acknowledge people, right? So whoever says, "Hi, Adam Strong," I don't know who you are, Facebook user, but if you accept the T's and the C's above, then I can see you. So anyway, all good in the hood. So what else was I going to say? There was something else I was going to say. I just kind of had this epiphany. Listen, interestingly enough, I want to go straight into the show, because we've got some great people coming up on the show every Wednesday. We've got another great guy coming up next week, which I'll tell you about actually at the end of the show. But anyway, let's talk about today's show, because today's show is we've actually become very good friends, actually, especially in the Clubhouse space. If you don't know what Clubhouse is, it's the audio only app on iOS and Apple. And for every time that I host a room, which is normally twice a week, he'll normally facilitate and come. But do you know what? Some of honestly, I find that, especially with Clubhouse, is that you really begin to find your tribe, right? So some people, by the way, really type of person, or based on your values and things like that. So it's interesting, right? Because you attract with who you become, type of thing. And for me, I've really found, I suppose, this tribe of great people, which from a place of authenticity, right, and value, rather than thinking about how can I fill my pockets with money and sell my soul to the devil, as I like to call it, right? Which is not real. But I know that my good friend Rory, who I'm going to introduce very, very shortly, he's going to laugh at that. He's probably listening to me in the background. What a big shout out to Mr. Anders Orberg. How you doing, Anders? Very good to see you. And to Daniel. How are you, Daniel? Great to see you as well. It's great that we've got some great engagement for today. So listen, without further ado, I want to introduce my good friend. We actually met, I believe we had met actually at a conference business conference a few years ago in the United States. And then I suppose with anything, right, when you get busy, you kind of you lose communication, right? You lose touch with people. And in Clubhouse, which is great, which has kind of brought a lot of people together. And for me, this individual, which his name is Rory Atkinson, is from South Africa, is absolutely an expert. He actually started off with rescuing struggling businesses, but has now moved into the digital market space, done so for quite some time. And I tell you what, honestly, I'm not being funny. When we have conversations with with some of our facilitators and moderators on Clubhouse, honestly, we absolutely crush it. We have so much candid conversations, and it's fun, right? It's so fun. It really is. But listen, absolute titan when it comes to digital marketing, knows lots about algorithms, super sophisticated guy, but I tell you what, absolutely loves giving value. So without further ado, give you a round of applause to Mr. Rory Atkinson. Woo!
Hello. How are you doing, Adam? Hello, everybody.
I'm good, Rory. How are you doing today? Happy Wednesday.
Happy Wednesday to you too. Can you hear me clearly?
I can hear you clearly. Absolutely. Am I
good?
Coming in clear?
Breaking up every now and again, but your internet connection will leave for another conversation another day. comes from living on an island lifestyle luxury. Hey.
It's called third world country, and yes, Anders, I know, bad connection. I get it 100%. I'm gonna blame the internet connection, not me. So I apologize for that. But anyway, listen, you just have to put up with it, right? It's all good. So listen, I mean, we had some great conversations in Clubhouse and things like that, right? But let's talk about, because I know that you've been on the Game Changer Summit, which was back at the end of January, which was great because I know that you were speaking a lot about communities there, which was great. And I thought it was extremely, timely and really, really good. But tell us a little bit about, I mean, you transitioned from, I suppose, business rescuer to kind of digital marketeer as such. How did that work out? And you know, why digital marketing and not what you were doing before? I just kind of was curious about that.
So, I mean, I'm still doing turnaround stuff. It's not like I've stopped completely. I'm still doing it. I just don't pursue it in quite the same fashion as I used to do, utilizing investor structures and things like that. I still do it quietly on the side. But how I kind of got into it was I needed digital marketing for the businesses that I was doing consultancy work for. Because I also ran a successful consultancy firm as well while doing turnarounds myself. And I just kind of ran into this problem of every single marketing company I hired to do our marketing or web development company to build our websites just did a crap job. There's no other way to put it. No bullshit, you know. Just did a crap job. And I kind of lost my cool eventually when I had two specific businesses I needed websites built for, and eventually by the time I'd got to the end of it, I had written all the copy, done the actual design, layout, format, and structure, the flow of the website, the conversionality of the website. I'd basically chosen all the back-end software. I'd selected all the imagery myself, and I kind of sat there and scratched my head and what the hell am I paying these guys for? So then I found, then I was at another business event, and I was like, okay, Christ, let's see if I can find somebody that actually knows what they're doing in marketing. And unfortunately, I couldn't. So I did bump into a young guy there, Nick Findlay, who's my business partner in the digital marketing company, who was still at university doing BSc in computer science. And we got chatting a little bit about stuff, and he had a keen business mind, but he also had a really clever technical brain for developing websites. So I said to him, okay, well, let's do some websites together, some for my clients, and then let's see how it goes. And eventually we turned it into a company to build websites for other people, because people saw what we were doing with our sites, liked what we were doing, and said, can you build us a site? Yeah, sure. Funny how that kind of turns into a business over time. And then how we got into the marketing space was after about a year and a half or so of building websites for people as a company, website building company. We just kind of had to naturally get in touch with what was happening in the marketing world, in the digital space. And it became the natural evolution process of the business. Was first we started with Facebook, and we were doing some social media content development, and then we started with Facebook ads, and then it became LinkedIn, and then so it rolled on and on and on, and eventually we reached the point where we were doing, everything across the board: YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. And the SEO as well became a big part. And then that kind of generated my fascination into the algorithm side of things. So, tech's not my, even though I've got a background in engineering, tech's not my strongest suit, but I love systems. I'm a systems guy. From top to bottom, I love systems. So for me, it was, oh, well, here's a system I get to game. And I love game theory. So this was just like a match made in heaven. It's an ever-evolving system process that I get to play around with every day.
Love it. Listen, I've got some burning questions that I want to ask you, okay? Maybe questions that we had a discussion first. And I always have discussions when it comes to marketing, because for me, and it's probably the same for our listeners as well, right, is that we're all students of learning. Give a shit, like, if you everyone is, you can never kind of put a ceiling on your learning capabilities. Do you know what I mean? I'm a big believer of everyone's a student. I want to kind of move into, I know that you mentioned algorithms, right? And it's interesting because one of the burning questions that I know that our audience is going to be making, right, is, why are people not seeing my fucking posts? Right? I suppose to me it's a bit of a rant, really, in a nutshell. But why are people not seeing my posts? And what's there, Rory? Tell us a little bit about that.
So, I mean, it's kind of interesting. It depends on which platform you're talking about. Okay. Let's start with Facebook, because that's probably the one that most people that are listening now are most familiar with. If you're writing posts on there, the algorithm changed. You will have noticed a significant change a couple of months back. Probably in September there was a small one. June, July there was a change in the algorithm, and then last year, right before COVID right after COVID kind of kicked off in March, there was a big change. Before that, you would do a post, right? And the post would go out, and it would be seen by lots of people in your following list or in your friends list. And then if you set it to public, there would be some organic discovery elements as well there, where people that related something to you could be found, or could find your post. This changed in March, April last year, with the initial introduction of a slightly more restrictive post. And initially, the algorithm on Facebook was changed to cope with the influx of misinformation, which, fair cop. That is kind of something that was happening on Facebook. And so it became, like all things, it's AI driven, right? So it needed time to learn, and then it learned, but then it kind of learned the wrong way. So then they went and fixed it again in June. And then they discovered that by this oppressive nature of it, it was driving more people to run post boosting and various other things to get more engagement back onto their posts. And Facebook is a company, a publicly listed company with shareholders. They like money. So they basically went off and went, okay, how can we engineer this thing now to be far more restrictive? So now what's happened is it's brought the organic discovery levels right down. And you kind of have to spend money to be seen, unless you've got a big following. This has kind of changed how Facebook operates as a platform for engagement. It's still a fantastic platform. You just need to understand that the discovery cycle, we talk about a discovery cycle, is how long between posts, or how many post cycles you need to run through before somebody will see a repeat of your post again. Used to sit at around 2 weeks to 3 weeks. 2 to 3 days at worst case, and now it's really long. There's lots of theories about how long it is, but I've heard numbers anywhere between 2 weeks and up to a month and a half in terms of post discovery. So you can pretty much make the same kinds of posts multiple times, and only a tiny percentage of your audience will repeat see that post. So the actual specifics of it are it's a little complicated because it depends on each post, but there's ways to game the mechanic to improve your organic discovery. So that's sort of in a nutshell there. Facebook now has moved far more in towards a group privacy kind of structure. It's really good for facilitating private groups and funneling people into that for management purposes and things like that. And there it's quite good. If the group is set to private, the viewability of the post that you write in your privacy group is actually boosted compared to if your group is open. So there's also little game changes that they've done there. If we're talking about a platform like, so I mean, that's Facebook in a nutshell. If we're talking about Instagram, Instagram's actually still, even though it's owned by Facebook, is still free, fairly free on the natural discovery, which is why you're seeing this link with Clubhouse being so phenomenal for people, because it's just boosting your discoverability. The only thing that you really have to understand about gaming the algorithm on Instagram, and I'm not a big Instagrammer, but I've spoken now with enough people that are big Instagrammers to kind of get a good feel of it personally as well. And the big thing there is you have to learn to game it with what kinds of posts. So things like Reels and Stories do extremely well on Instagram for both organic discovery and internal group discovery. So that's kind of Instagram in a nutshell. Movies or videos in particular do very, very well on Instagram. And I think it's possibly also because the platform is geared so heavily towards the visual aspect. So copy is not going to do great, but video itself is going to do phenomenally well. And then there's lots of different tricks and games you can play to mess with the algorithm to make it more efficient using meta tags and things like that are relevant. But at the end of the day, your engagement is going to drive Instagram's discovery the hardest. So encouraging more people that you are friends with to engage with your posts is going to drive further discovery. That's kind of how that algorithm is set up. And then finally, if we're looking at something like LinkedIn, I'm not going to go into all the other sub-platforms, but if I'm looking at something like LinkedIn, I've actually kind of recently been looking at what the difference is in the algorithm between having a paid LinkedIn account, i.e. the LinkedIn Premium, or just having a standard LinkedIn account. And it's way higher with a paid account. That's not something they advertise, but I can show you the statistic difference between the two. It's almost 10 to 1 in terms of discovery and reach within your own followership and organic reach. So LinkedIn's a little different. You kind of have to play the game of talking to other people to get your own page to boost. So the more you engage with other people on their posts, the more your posts are going to get back engagement. Think of it kind of like backlinking in websites, right? It's kind of the same style, right? So that's kind of what's happening on LinkedIn. And then LinkedIn's also got a couple of sort of priority things. So video does extremely well on LinkedIn more recently, but heavily sort of edited videos seem to do worse than sort of slightly casual videos. I'm not really sure why. That's just sort of the stats that I'm seeing on my side. I'm not the LinkedIn expert. Shanae is probably the LinkedIn expert from Clubhouse if you want to talk to her. And then the other thing that's doing really well is polls, which is why if you're on LinkedIn a lot, like I am, you're seeing every Tom, Dick, and Harry is posting 1,000 bloody polls out. and it's got a very high engagement ratio, right? So that's why the algorithm is pushing that. I hope that answers your question, Adam.
Yeah.
Money is a short answer to answer
absolutely.
your question.
I was going to touch Listen, when you speak to Rory, by the way, right, it's never a short answer. It's just kind of, it's very detailed to the point, though. Anyway, question from my good friend Anders Åberg from over in Stockholm in Sweden. It says, he said, and I'm not going to put it up on the screen because it's so big, but I'll read it out. It says, machine learning algorithms have become increasingly popular. They are developing their behavior by analyzing training examples. I was going to say, creating statistical interface models on social media.
I've lost
Are
that.
there final say on how it's going to behave? Oh, 1 second. In fact, let me bring this up. Can you read this? Hang on a minute.
Yeah, I can read it.
There we go. Yep. Let's bring that up.
So on social media.
It's an interesting question, though. What do you think about that?
Are there risks involved with this? Yes. So one of the things, I mean, if you're talking specifically about botting algorithm manipulation, which just drop a thumbs up if that's what you're referring to, Anders. But so botting is a classic thing that we've seen online, and in terms of developing algorithmic tweaks. And yes, that does carry a huge risk, because all it takes is for the company to identify it using their own algorithm, or their own AI sniffers, basically, and then you can be considered violating terms of service, and then goodbye all your accounts, right? And if it's something like Facebook that actually has multiple linked platforms, then their terms of service allows them to ban you flat out across the whole board. So if what you're talking about is research bots, so that's bots that go out and just quietly harvest data effectively, you got to be careful more about what country you're doing that in, because say for example you're doing it in the EU, that's going to be violating many many privacy laws there, and you'll probably get a big fine from the government, particularly if you're German or something like that. Then you'll get nailed. But that information data collection is frowned upon only in specific locations. It's not necessarily frowned upon by the platform. It kind of depends on how you're doing it. If you're doing it in an egregious fashion, then yes, it's going to be frowned upon. So if you're embedding software to do it, if you're running passive learning algorithms, then that's less of a concern. And
probably
then,
get MI5
necessarily the final say on how it's going to behave won't be the site owner, or can this be controlled? So how it's going to, I mean, are you talking about the actual algorithm of the website, of the platform, Anders, or are you talking about the algorithm of the machine learning aspect from your own piece of software? I need some engagement here, because I'm not sure which one he's referring to, because it changes the answer.
Listen, we like engagement, guys. You can keep the engagement up. We kind of like challenging questions. I know Rory likes that, challenging questions anyway.
Yeah, and I'm not even the tech guy. My partner Nick's probably the one to actually ask all the detailed questions about the tech stuff. The platform.
There you go, the platform.
Okay, cool. So if you're talking about the actual platform itself, the platform is okay. So there's two elements to the platform. There's the actual platform's hard code itself, which is the interface that you deal with on the front end and the back end, and then there's the actual AI in the background. And it's not one AI. There's multiple AIs that run in layered format, and they're going to regulate very differently depending on location, post following, that kind of stuff, previous engagement. SEO standing has an impact on it as well. Platform cross-linking and things like that also tweaks it. So if your question there is, do you have control over it? To some extent you do. You can game the system. It's not so much that you have direct control over it. You just have to learn the little triggers that tell the algorithm the things it likes. When you're dealing with AI, you need to think about it this way, right? It's a computer. So what happens is the computer coder tells the people that this program here, or this action here, is worth 1 sweetie, right? And this one here is worth 2 sweeties, and this one here is worth 5 sweeties, and this one here is worth 20 sweeties. So which one do you think the computer is going to push hardest for? It's going to go for the 20 sweeties, unless that 20 sweeties one takes too much of its own time to check up, in which case it'll fall back to the next layer back, and so on. I'm really oversimplifying AI development here, but it's also going to depend on the nature of the AI development, okay? And so what I mean by gaming the system is working out what these different sweeties are. So for example, let's go to Instagram, right? The AI loves Reels. We know it loves Reels, okay? But then there's additional little sweeties you can add to that component with things like, okay, here's a meta tag. So now it's not just getting the 5 sweeties from the reel, it's also getting 1 from the meta tags. Are you doing an additional video thing with it as well? Okay, there's another extra little bit of sweetie. Have you previously, as an Instagram person, have you previously engaged with multiple people in the last 24 hours? Yes. Okay, great. So this person gets another little sweetie allocation. And so the game goes like that. And every platform has got different games that it plays. SEO is probably the one that is the most complicated to learn how to game, though, because Google makes so many changes across so many different aspects of its platform that its actual AI learning is really hard to learn how to game. But again, there are little tricks you can do. So, Anders, I hope that answers your question.
I got a question around the old SEO.
Follow up.
I do have a question around the old SEO, and I suppose my question to you really is because back probably about 5, maybe 7 years ago, SEO used to be a really big deal, right? Because you could use keywords and you could use certain hashtags, and then people would write blogs which had multiple times over, right, with the amount of different words, and then Google would index it and it would go straight to number 1. But obviously that doesn't happen anymore because Google's not stupid. I wish it if only it did.
It does actually happen. It still happens, Adam, but what they did was they did realize this was the case, and a lot of platforms actually realized this was the case, not just Google. But what they realized was there's got to be a usability index as well. So they created 2 sets of SEO. The one is purely an algorithmic structure, which is what we know from the old term SEO. And then there's a new one, which is the usability index, which is basically how usable is your site in terms of a browser. So it's gone are the days where you could create, hundreds of backlink pages that had no real purpose or no real structure, but were just there to cheat the SEO system, right? Google will now penalize you significantly for that, because while it's got a high rating in terms of the old school SEO, okay, they've also changed the priorities in that, but let's just assume that it was still the old version, right? Even though you would kill it on that, you're not killing it on the usability. In fact, you're not created something at all for humans to look at. So because the humans are now not being able to utilize it, Google just goes, nope, go away. And so they actually penalize you for that. It's also something that you can see in lots of other platforms. So let's use Clubhouse, that you and I also do quite a lot, right? The Clubhouse algorithm's got an interesting little usability thing there now. If you have people sitting in your room on the stage and not engaging, not flicking mics, not conversing, not actually talking, the algorithm will actually punish your room badly in terms of discovery for that, because you are basically trying to milk their followers by them not engaging. So it's actually more beneficial to bounce people out of the room, or out back down to the audience, leave them there for a couple minutes, and then if you need to, pull them back up again when you need them to. But there's just an example of an algorithm looking at usability as much as it's looking at the SEO traction element of it.
Right.
So all those keywords and things are still really important. Backlinks are still important. In terms of websites, probably the most important thing is probably speed these days, and that's from both a usability and an SEO standpoint. We try and typically aim for somewhere between 2 to 3 seconds on desktop and between 3 to 5 seconds load time on mobile, and that's on image-heavy websites. And there's lots of ways you can cheat it to make it faster, but at the end of the day, there's two reasons you want to do this. One, if I click on your website on my phone and it takes a couple seconds to load, more than 3 or 4 seconds to load, I'm just going to close it. I'm not going to bother waiting for it. Screw you. It's even worse when you're trying to navigate through a site and every page is doing that. But at the end of the day, it's both from a navigation standpoint, but then also Google is looking at it going, oh my word, this has got a massive click-off ratio. We should not promote this site at all. So you really need to focus very heavily on making sure that your sites are both very user efficient, i.e. minimal click-through process, and that people will stay on your site, so view them a while, and come back. Another thing that's also ticked up quite a lot recently is that people revisit your sites. So you'll see that's kind of come with the e-commerce shift that happened in 2020, 2019 because of COVID, that Google is now favoring that element as well if you have repeat attendees. Yeah.
Cool. Very good. Interestingly enough, as we were talking about LinkedIn, I don't know if you were aware about a feature, Rory, and it's similar. Let's say, take a look. If I go into LinkedIn, I wanted to, I don't know if you're aware about a new feature on LinkedIn. There's a new feature on LinkedIn that I wanted to share with you. It's a little bit like on Instagram. When you do an Instagram story, it's a LinkedIn story. Are you aware of this?
I know about LinkedIn stories. I haven't personally played around with them as of yet. It's on my to-do list. I've just been trying to get my video brand stuff out of late.
Well, I was just curious to see if you'd played around with it, and because I know that I was going to say with a lot of platforms that have got new features on, they really like you to, sort of engage with the new features, and they reward you for it, don't they?
Massively. So anytime a platform introduces any kind of new feature, they're always going to give you cookies for doing it or sweeties for doing it, right? It's just a matter of whether or not other people actually like engaging with it. So I'm always more interested in engagement statistics than I am interested in vanity statistics. So for the audience's perspective, so that they know what I'm talking about, vanity stats are things like likes and follows and that kind of thing. When you get little clappy hands on LinkedIn or thumbs up on Facebook or hearts on Instagram, these used to be considered parts of engagement, but I just don't classify them as engagement because they don't actually turn into anything. They will boost your algorithmic standpoint a little bit, but not anything massively. What you're really pushing for is comments and back and forth engagement on your comments, or shares. Shares is also a big one. So if the new feature on LinkedIn is going to really help push further engagement, then I'm all on board, and it's all the better that the algorithm is keen on it. But if it's not going to push engagement, if it's going to just be one of those sort of throw by the wind kind of things like Facebook has tried many times with lots of different things, then you're going to end up just spending a lot of time there, wasting your time. I'm going to keep an eye on about 5 people on LinkedIn and see whether they're doing it. And if they start doing it, I'll start doing it immediately. And it basically boils down to that. I follow the absolute experts of it. So that's, you don't need to learn everything when it comes to digital marketing. Sometimes it just helps to have a good couple of well-educated friends.
Absolutely. 100% agree, by the way, 100% agree. Interestingly enough, as we're talking about audio-only apps, which is extremely popular now because we've got Clubhouse now, where do you see the future of audio-only apps? And how does, if people are on audio-only apps like Clubhouse, for example, LinkedIn are bringing out one, Facebook are in development to bring in one for Android and stuff, Twitter Spaces were kind of whipping their toe in, but it kind of failed miserably, I suppose. Sorry, Twitter. What do you, from your particularly?
Sorry, Adam, you broke up there for a second.
Oh, sorry. How would you? Any? I suppose any comments or any advice from for our audience with regards to embracing audio-only apps in terms of growing a business and audio-only?
So yeah, they've been game changers. and they'll continue to be game changers. I don't see it going
Oh.
anywhere anytime soon. It's far too game changing for the business world in particular, and this is why I'm quite excited about LinkedIn's one in particular. Is I think it poses a significant threat to Clubhouse from a business standpoint. If they implement it extremely well, I see a big shift straight across. That's what's going to happen with the business world. They'll just straight across. But I don't know that it'll kill Clubhouse, because Clubhouse has got such big reach with other kinds of rooms, not just business rooms. Obviously, you and I roll the business space, so that's kind of what we see all the time, because that's what the algorithm wants to deliver to us. But at the end of the day, there are other rooms for all sorts of things, dating and mind feed stuff and meditation, all sorts of things. So I think it's probably one of the biggest game-changing things that's happened in the digital space for a couple years now. And really will change the way things interact. And in terms of how do you utilize it in business, well, you need to have a strategy. Simple as that. Like all social media stuff, you need a strategy. You can't just kind of dive in and willy-nilly around and things like that. Yeah, you can do that if you're not really doing it for a business standpoint. But if you're doing it for a business standpoint, you need a strategy. And like all social media platforms, there is an etiquette to doing it. And you need to learn that etiquette. Every day on Clubhouse, there's a room that runs, I think it basically runs 24 hours a day, which is specifically there for new people that come onto Clubhouse. And there you can ask as many questions as you want, and the moderators there, will look after you and hold your hand and guide you and just take you through the basic etiquette learning rules. Because if you drop into a room and you immediately put your hand up to go and speak on stage, and you say something, you try and pitch people immediately on your product or something like that, you're going to get shut down really fast, and you're going to get a bad reputation really quickly. So you kind of have to go in with a genuine authenticity. That's my best advice to you, is don't try and go in there and be anything that you're not. Just be yourself. Be your I just say just be your silly self, like I am. say idiotic things occasionally and laugh at it and laugh at yourself, and you'll find what will happen is there's certain clicks on Clubhouse, for example, that sort of roll together that you can kind of break into and start following and engaging. And like all social media platforms, it's all about relationship building. So
Agreed.
Just leverage these audio platforms to build better relationships. And then as you're building these relationships, you'll get invited to other rooms and talking in other rooms and things. And this will be true when Facebook introduces its platform. This will be true when LinkedIn introduces its platform, when Instagram veritably has some kind of adaptation process as well. If Twitter ever bothers to get off their ass and build something, and we'll see them. But I don't see that happening. That'll just turn into a cesspit overnight.
Probably.
So
it's interesting.
I wouldn't want to be on that one.
Yeah, that's a whole new conversation. But what I was going to say to you, I remember it was probably about 18 months ago, and the whole debate was, is Twitter going to die, right? Because there wasn't anything kind of new from them. Do you know what I mean? And Twitter Spaces, people were kind of getting excited about it. But I absolutely agree with you. There's a lot of haters on there, and there's a lot of trolls on there, which you've got to be careful of. So word of warning, ladies and gentlemen. But by the way, for you guys that are listening in, even if you're listening to the recording from this later, if you are on Clubhouse, use the comment in the comment section below, post your username, and we'll follow each other. Well, but what is your username, by the way, Rory? I
think it's at RC Atkinson. I think on Clubhouse.
Yeah, cool.
RC.
Yeah, this
Atkinson.
is actually really RC Atkinson. Cool. I'll put it up in the chat box.
Yeah, give me a follow. I'm
anyway,
always on there.
This is a really interesting question. Says, yeah, and this is a really good question, because I actually had a friend of mine, Rory, and he gave up Clubhouse recently because he was concerned about the GDPR and privacy policy. What's your take on this?
Yeah. So there's a couple of things. The back end in terms of security of Clubhouse is shockingly poor. It's not well designed and not well structured. one of the guys that I spend quite a lot of time on Clubhouse around is a man called Lejay. He's the global strategist for the Wonder Group. And in fact, he's much more knowledgeable about this and is probably the right person to ask all the detailed questions about. And so my limited knowledge, I will answer this question for you, but he is the guy to ask the details of. For me, I think in terms of privacy risk, it is got an element to it, and it's a matter of time until things start getting hacked and all the rest. I believe that they are working on improving their security in the back end. Fortunately, it's Apple based, so that already adds a natural layer of privacy, and I think it might be part of the reason why they've delayed so long to get Android on board. Not just from a strategic standpoint, but I think also from a security standpoint, because Android is far easier to hack out than Apple in a lot of cases. That said, in terms of the violations of policy, well, it's kind of like all social media. You're kind of always treading a gray line. That's sort of the way I would always look at it, is you're always stepping slightly one side or slightly the other side in most instances. I am concerned about it, but not concerned enough to not use it because it makes too much money. I'll be honest.
You know, it's interesting, right? Me and Rory know on a number of people. We know a number of people that have probably made 6 figures from Clubhouse alone, which just kind of says it's a great. It's not just what I'm calling a money-making platform. Yeah, it's good, but you've got to put the hard work in, and you've got to have a strategy, like Rory said.
Yeah, you've got to put the time in. Look, I mean, I was in a room today for 4.5 hours earlier. I'll be in another one later tonight again for another 2.5, 3 hours. I try and be on for between 5 to 6 hours every day. So if I'm putting that much time into it, you must know that it's a pretty valuable platform to invest your energy and time into. The other thing is it gives you direct access to people that you otherwise will never have access to in your life. Lejay is actually a good example of that. He's a phenomenal guy, but if it wasn't for Clubhouse, I would never have met him, never have had interaction with him, would never have connected with him on LinkedIn, would never have had a conversation with him. And I can list many people that fall into that category thanks to Clubhouse. So for anything, it's just a phenomenal networking platform to grow your network and get to know some people outside of your general business circle. Because that can be quite difficult to break out of, especially now in this sort of semi-restrictive digital age where even though we're all online, it's very hard to discover each other. So Clubhouse has kind of made that discovery process really easy. And I think that's what's really kicked it off as hard as it has.
And I love the fact that you can get, accessibility is great. And who would be able to get access to Gary Vaynerchuk and Grant Cardone? These people are virtually inaccessible.
Mark Zuckerberg the other day.
Actually cover conversation. There you go. You see,
yeah.
I mean, it's not rockets, guys. It's kind of cool. I kind of like that. What I was going to say, we're just coming towards the show, whatever it is. It's amazing. I mean, time's just flown by. But any final thoughts?
Always the case with you, Adam.
I know.
It's always the case with you. The time always just gone.
I know. It's just crazy. It just kind of, when you're having fun, it's like, oh my God, 43 minutes. That's insane. Are you crazy? Any final thoughts, by the way, from a digital marketing perspective? Because I know that there's a lot of listeners kind of thinking that in anticipation, what are you going to give us?
Well, okay, so couple of things here. I mean, I'll give you some bullet point stuff if that'll help. Although I don't do bullet points That's well, cool. Adam will attest to that. Okay, let's see. Bullet points here. Guys, you need to focus on building community. Community is the king at the moment online, building some kind of community element. And you can do this by moving people through layers of community. So what do I mean by that? Discovery, that means that you don't know the people at all. The people don't know you at all. That would be the discovery phase. Then you move them from whatever that form is, whether that's post boosting, whether that's posts you're doing, whether that's cross engagement on other platforms. You move them into your sort of immediate touching points. So I would call that first touching points, where you can actually deliver some value to them, some content to them in some capacity, gather some information from them in some capacity, or get them to purchase a small product or service from you. This is kind of like the trick to it, is make a loss initially, and then you can kind of go from there. Then you can move them into a initial community. This is generally quite a broad community structure. It can have tens of thousands of people in it if you really need to, but the important thing is that it is an engaged community. It is privatized if you want to make it privatized, or alternatively, it's open to more people to invite other people into that community. You'll just need another filtering layer below that. And then you move those people, the ones that are truly really engaged, not just hanging around on the sidelines, but the ones that are truly really engaged, into a much higher intense community. And I know Adam's got one of those as well, which often these communities are hidden behind paywalls, and they work extremely well. And don't even think if it's only for small businesses. It's not. Again, I go back to Lajay. He was talking to me about how he's got private groups for high-end multi-millionaire and billionaire people on WhatsApp groups where they just talk crap. Basically, they network and share information, but that's part of that company's group. And the reason that you do that is because the higher up the chain of sort of target that you're going after, the different approach that you're going to have in curating these kinds of communities, because their goals, the people that are in there, their goals are going to change. If you're talking about somebody that's worth many millions, they don't really care that much about your course that you're going to sell them. That's utterly irrelevant to them. You're going to be far more engaged with them if you can send them to your buddy that does franchising, like Sean Goldsmith, right? Like he does that all the time on Clubhouse, where he's like, oh, I've got this friend somewhere. So the running joke on Clubhouse is that Sean knows somebody that knows somebody that knows you somewhere along the line, right? So, and that's kind of what you got to do in the new society, is make sure that your community structures are well laid out, and that you have good funnel things. Here's another tip about online at the moment. If people want to buy, make it easy for them. Don't make them jump through hoops to buy from you. Too many people try and put forms and submissions and all this stuff. Stop it. Just make it as simple and easy as possible for people to engage with you, whether that's to buy a product or alternatively to engage with you directly in some kind of relationship or network relationship facility. Last thing is, when you guys are taking people from direct messages, so that's during your relationship building process, do not, for crying in a bucket, send them Calendly links. You need to make it as easy as possible for other people to engage with you on a Zoom call or a phone call or whatever. Take that conversation from the direct messaging onto some kind of call process, but in doing so, make it as easy as it's for them. If they have to go and click on stuff and fill in forms and stuff like that, you're making them do work. And the higher the level of the person, the more they're going to tell you to go screw yourself. So, so to be honest with you, you just need to make sure that you do all the work. Say to them straight, give them 2 times. Say to them, hey, I've got time available at 9:15 tomorrow morning and at 10:45 tomorrow night. 15 and 45 work quite well, by the way. It's a recent trick I picked up on. Then give them only 2 options, and most of the time they'll pick one of those 2. If they can't find it, then schedule around their time schedule and say, hey, what works for you? You give me a couple times and I'll work out where I can fit it in. Then you send them immediately the Zoom link or the phone call number or whatever, the calendar booking, everything. Make sure that everything is done for them. Don't make them go and click and book and pick a time out of your calendar. Nobody is that busy that they can't do that on their behalf. I've had calls with people that are worth many millions, and they do all the work for me, and I'm not worth many millions like they are. They've really shown me how to do client engagement in that respect, and it works. It improves the rate of conversion significantly. So there's my bullet points.
That's good. We like that. We like bullet points. Listen, guys, if you have any questions, use the comments section in the comment section below. By the way, connect with myself and also with Rory on LinkedIn is his preferred platform. You will not catch him very much on Instagram.
No, I've started posting there occasionally, Adam. Only with room.
It's all good. Listen, guys, make sure that you connect with Rory on LinkedIn. By the way, if you have any digital marketing questions, or if you have any questions based on tonight's episode, do me a favor, reach out to Rory Atkinson on LinkedIn, and you'll see Rory Atkinson, South Africa. I think it's Cape Town, right?
Yeah, Cape Town. Yeah.
Perfect. There you go. So listen, guys, hope you've enjoyed today's show. We'll see you back in again, by the way, next week. We've got an amazing guy from Chicago, Illinois, and also going to be making a couple of awesome announcements. So I'm really excited about that. And yeah, listen, have a fantastic week. Make sure that you join me and Rory tomorrow on Clubhouse, if you have an Apple phone, of course, at 8 a.m. British Standard Time. That's 8 a.m. British Standard Time. And we're going to be talking about is your business scalable?
Glenn's
anyway,
favorite topic.
we did it. We actually did it last week. It was absolutely cracking. So really good. Thanks very much to Daniel. Very good much to Anders. Very good much. It's all good. So listen, guys, have a great week, and we'll see you again next week from Rhea and Rory. Take care. See you soon.
Cheers, guys.